Apple Studio Display is its first display since 2011. Well, it's its first display to include a stand, and not at a $5,000 asking price without the $1,000 optional stand, but I think you know where I'm coming from here. This is Apple's first, let's call it, to be nice, a consumer-grade level monitor, one that is actually attainable even at its high $1,600 price point. And since this is Apple's first true consumer-grade monitor in over 10 years, I'm here to tell you why I am buying it, and why you should too. Well, let's first talk about why this is such a big deal. Why is everyone making such a fuss about a computer monitor? People are going crazy for the Studio Display. Well, at least Mac fans are, because I think the Studio Display is important for Mac users, because you have to kind of understand the history here. Apple used to make a lot of different displays for their Mac customers, and the last really true, again, consumer level display that we got from Apple was in 2011 with their Thunderbolt display. And that display was sold for a very long time until Apple discontinued it in 2016, where they basically got out of the display business altogether, and they partnered with LG to make Mac displays that fit their specification. So these displays were good on paper. They were $1,300 for the equivalent 5K display, so they were cheaper, and they basically came with Apple's display panels. Now, obviously, LG still made the panel for Apple, but Apple kind of gave them their own custom color profile tweaks and basically built it out to the specs that they wanted with the 5K Retina resolution that would fit for that 27-inch display, and they also made a smaller 4K display at 21.5 inches, and then eventually they made a 24-inch LG ultrafine 4K monitor as well. So these displays were basically up to Apple specs, and they got a lot of things right with the display quality, but they also got a lot of things wrong. Things that traditionally, if Apple was making a display, they would have not got wrong. Things like the design. I think since the beginning or introduction of the LG ultrafine 5K display, one thing almost everyone said about this was that the design at its best was uninspiring and just looked like a regular PC monitor with the same black plastic casing that all these other PC monitors had. And at its worst, it had some weird design elements going on to it. Like, it had like a bigger forehead than the bottom chin area. And just overall, this was like a big, creaky, plastic looking monitor. And it didn't look like it was something that Apple made. And it does truly baffle me sometimes that when you look at this Apple Studio display, I don't know about you, but I think it is a very nice looking display. Certainly almost better than anything else that you can get from any other Apple display with the LG Ultrafine 5K, but other PC monitor displays as well. I just don't see something that I really want to put on my desk, something that inspires me to use this device. And I think when you speak to a lot of Apple customers, a lot of Mac customers, they want something that looks nice on their desk. They just don't want a generic looking monitor that, okay, the display panel looks nice. They actually want this design to fit into whatever desk setup they're doing. So that is something that Apple focuses on traditionally with all of their product lines, but especially in an external monitor, it's just not something you see focused on a lot. You just see these kind of all look generically the same, and then they just focus on the display panel and leave everything else aside. And these monitors also lacked other nice features that Apple usually focuses on. So you didn't get nice speakers with it, and by all accounts, looking at the specs for the Studio Display and seeing the speaker system that they just integrated into it, I would expect that to actually be a really competent inbuilt speaker system for that new Studio Display, especially with the 6-speaker system and with Apple focusing on spatial audio. If you ever listen to the new MacBook Pro speakers, you know those are pretty good. So Apple getting even more headroom to work with in a 27-inch monitor, I'm just going to assume those speakers are going to sound pretty excellent. Apple also focuses on other nice things. So the webcam in these new external displays, it's not just a nice webcam, it also has the center stage feature, which has previously been exclusive to the iPad lineup. And actually, strangely enough, even the MacBooks don't have this yet. So this will be an exclusive feature right now for the Mac on this studio display. And that's partly the reason why Apple has that A13 chip in there to run features like the center stage camera feature. So that is actually a pretty compelling feature. It's building out the kind of value that you would get with this monitor as opposed to just going with other monitor options in its price range. This is also one of Apple's most versatile monitors yet. So it does come in with a stand at $1,600, which is kind of like that iMac stand where you can kind of adjust the angle of it, but there's really no height adjustment. Well, Apple actually now gives you that option as well, although to be fair, I think it's really overpriced here, asking for an additional $400 for a height adjustable stand. It looks like it's kind of based on the same design as the Pro Display XDR stand, so it's probably a little bit over-engineered here for what most customers would want. But hey, this is an option that Apple gives you, where before with their Thunderbolt monitor, you didn't even have that option. And then obviously you always have that VESA mount option if you want to bring your own VESA mount stand into this, and that is the same price as going with the included stand. Now, it's important to remember that you do have to pick the stand configuration you want at the time of purchase. I don't know why this is. I don't know why Apple could incorporate a design where you could switch out stands easier, but if you want the generic stand, it's $1,600. If you want that height adjustable stand, you better make sure you know you want it, because that's an additional $400. And then if you really want the VESA mount option, which is not going to give you any stand out of the box, but if you already have a VESA mount stand that you want to use or you plan on using, well, you need to make sure you check that option as well. You also get the option of putting a nano texture glass finish, which would kind of make the display more of a matte finish that would reduce glare. And Apple says this is really good in bright environments where there's maybe like a lot of natural sunlight. And I have never personally used one of these nano textured glass displays before, but Apple has offered this option in the past on their Pro Display XDR and also on their previous iMac. And although I haven't used it, I've read a lot of reviews and seen a lot of videos covering the nano textured glass, and people say it works really well at reducing glare. So if that's an issue you face in your current work environment with a lot of light or glare, well, hey, here's another option. I've seen a lot of people always ask for matte finished display options, especially from Apple on their laptops and other devices. So here it is. You can actually get it now. I believe it's like a $200 add-on. But let's get back to the meat of what this studio display is, because it combines that, I think, great design, the better build quality, all of these additional features, now more versatility and options than ever, with a great looking 5K panel. And yeah, I don't have this studio display to review right now, but based on everything I know about Apple display panels and the fact that this is probably pretty much the same 5K panel that they took out of the Retina 5K iMac, with the only exception being that this studio display is actually going to be a little bit brighter at 600 nits versus the old iMac's 500 nits of brightness. This display should look great by all means. It has the really sharp 5K Retina resolution, which means it will get you, what Apple calls Retina on the pixel density. So if you're sitting at a normal viewing distance, you should not see pixels on this display. And then you're also getting the P3 wide color gamut and an excellent factory calibrated display. And I think a big benefit of that is right out of the box, this studio display will match almost perfectly or very nicely with your MacBook's inbuilt Retina display. So you're working on your MacBook, you plug it into the studio display, you should get a very similar display experience, with the big exception here, obviously, is that these studio displays are still not mini LED and still not HDR. So especially if you're coming from a new MacBook Pro, the black levels and then just the peak brightness on those when you're watching HDR video are still going to be better than even this external display. Okay, so you're watching this video and you're a skeptic, right? You're going, I don't want to get the studio display. I don't want to spend $1,600 on a monitor. There are plenty of other monitors out there. I don't really care about the design. I don't care about the speakers. I already have better speakers. I just want a good 4K display that I can hook up to my new Mac Studio or my existing Mac Mini or my MacBook cheaply. And hey, I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. There are plenty of options out there if none of this other stuff bothers you or anything I mentioned about this studio display doesn't appeal to you. You have a huge market of PC displays at that 4K resolution that you can go out and buy, and I think that's great. Any way to save money? Hey, I'm all for it. If that works for you and you have a great experience with it, why not go for those cheaper options? But to insert a quick counterpoint, I've seen a lot of people say the studio display is overpriced, and granted, I'm very close to agreeing with them there because I do feel like it should have been a little bit cheaper, especially given how close it is in price to the 5K iMac. You know, for $200 more before they discontinued the iMac, you could get a whole computer inside of it. Granted, it was an Intel computer. Now that we've seen M1, I don't know if people really want to use Intel computers anymore, but yes, you could get a full computer inside of it for $200 more with a 27-inch iMac. But I have to be fair to the studio display, and when I look at the market, the PC monitor market, and I look for a 5K display that fits Apple's billing for that Retina resolution and offers all of the simplicity of this monitor, of connecting it to your MacBook and having that charge off of one cable and one connection and using Thunderbolt, there isn't a lot out there for a 27-inch 5K Retina monitor. And before we leave here, I just want to bring it back to buying a studio display. Obviously, I said I am buying one, and I think most people watching this video would go, well, of course you're buying one. You make YouTube videos, you cover Apple, and I get that, that's fair. But I would also say, for you to buy this monitor, you're going to see a lot of coverage, especially on this new Mac Studio and the Studio Display in the next coming weeks, saying, this is for professional users, and consumers should not buy this display. I think that's wrong. I think that's totally wrong. I get the price is high. $1,600 in today's economy, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to be spending on a monitor. But granted, Apple monitors in the past have always been pretty pricey. We're talking about like $1,000 or $1,300, and then we're not even going to mention the Pro Display XDR's price at this point. But there is something to say about just wanting a nice experience. And that nice experience, although this monitor may be geared more towards professionals, is still something as a consumer that you can appreciate and something that you can want. Everyone wants a nice display. Everyone wants to work at a display where they look at it all day long and they're not going, this looks ugly, this looks bad. They want something that looks nice, both in terms of design and in terms of display quality, and the studio display gets you there, and it gives you all of the simplicity and elegance that you would expect from an Apple display. And if you're a consumer looking at this and you're hearing those comments of going, well, you don't need this, you don't need this. Sometimes it's not about the need. Sometimes it's about the want. And as someone who primarily used Apple products for basically their entire life, even before I started doing YouTube professionally, even before I started doing YouTube at all, I have always gravitated towards Mac products because of things like their design, their ease of use, and just because I like using them. And if that sounds like you, and you have the money to spend on this $1,600 monitor, and you want a studio display, and you're not in this professional environment, I don't think you should feel bad about that. I think you should get what you want. And if I was in your shoes, I would definitely want this display. I want it now. Because for me, this is the monitor I have been wanting Apple to make since they discontinued the Thunderbolt display in 2016. And I am so happy that we finally have an option. But I'm going to tell you even more about it when I actually get this thing in for review sometime this week. So if you want to see that full review of the studio display, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, make sure you give me a like. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.